So thank you very much. So it's Martyn Redstone here from AI Recruiter. I am joined today by Hung Lee, curator of brainfood.com, recruitingbrainfood.com. And we are going to be going through some questions and answers around Hung and how he manages his life, basically.
Yeah, excited to be here, Martyn. So yeah, let's get the show on the road. Let's do it. Let's do this.
Good stuff. So we're going to start from the top, really. Can you let us know where you're based? Whereabouts are you in the world right now?
Yeah, I'm based in London, in the UK. That's generally been the case last 20 years or so. So that's the HQ. That's where I do the work, and where obviously this year I've been entirely here. So yeah, that's the location, man.
With the famous red tiles behind you now that everybody knows.
Yeah, and it's amazing how people kind of associate the kitchen with me now. But yeah, that's where it is. This is basically not a bad spot to do podcasting because it's basically the best window I've got. Hopefully the lighting is okay without having to put artificial lighting on, which is bad for your eyes and stuff. So yeah, this is the spot where a lot of this is like a mini studio for me.
Good stuff. So tell me, I mentioned that you're obviously chief curator of recruitingbrainfood.com, which a lot of people will know you kind of best from. But what else do you do? What is your weekly kind of and daily job, Hung?
You know what? It's mainly the newsletter. I mean, I have to say, the history of the newsletter, it started off very much as a sideline, a project that really wasn't going to be, anything strategic or anything with a plan behind it. But obviously over time it's became a popular thing, and the community's just grown and grown. And as a result of that, it's like, there's always that community to serve now. So there's lots of different sort of channels now on Recruiting Brainfood. There's a video webinar, there's a thriving group on Facebook. There's all kinds of channels and tools that we've built around the idea of supporting the recruiting community, all of which require tinkering, but work and what have you. So yeah, I see myself now as basically ecosystem support, I would say. If you think of the recruitment marketplace being an ecosystem, all kinds of different kind of businesses and people in it. I'm doing what I can to basically elevate that entire ecosystem and do what I can to help out.
No, it's cool. As you know, I try and get myself as involved in that ecosystem as much as possible, and I really enjoy it. It's really great.
And you're a great supporter of the Brainfood, man. You're one of the prominent supporters of it, and great to see that. I really appreciate it as well, man.
Well, it's a no-brainer from my perspective. I've always said, just from the newsletter itself, there is so much that you can get out of that on a weekly basis that it's anybody that hasn't subscribed should definitely subscribe. And there we go. There's your free shout out. So you mentioned, obviously over the last 6 to 8 months, everybody's kind of started moving into a work from home basis. And people have gone from, having to kind of do a bit of an emergency office setup using ironing boards and all those kind of things as desks. What does your workspace look like now?
It's kind of like this. I actually have a standing desk, and I've been using that standing desk for a long time. So it's the way I think I've got bad posture, Martyn. So I mean, ultimately, I struggle if my posture doesn't shift, irrespective of whether I'm sitting, standing, or sleeping, right? So what I end up doing is not have a single set space where, this is the office. I have to move in some way. So what I've habituated myself to doing is essentially shifting from 3 different positions, which is number 1, standing desk, number 2, sitting at something like this, and number 3, this may sound weird, but there's actually a very low stool that I squat on, with a kind of a normal sized table, but I'm lower than the table, and
reaching up like that.
Yeah. And that also has the effect of stretching your back in a different way. So essentially I moved between those three positions during, the course of the day. And the day obviously is anything from like getting up at 6, going to sleep at, whatever time. So yeah, it's a long old day, but like I say, I don't think I can sit in any one sit or stand in any one position for 8 hours. I think my back ultimately does go basically.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I can't sit at a desk for that amount of time either. I find myself moving to the kitchen so that I can just use a standing kind of on the kitchen kind of work surface and what have you. So no, I totally get that. But the squatting on a stool thing is quite interesting. I have to think
Give
about
it a
that.
shot.
Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, it's actually just forces your spine to be straighter. And it not that I've read a lot on this, but I've read a lot on like what your natural posture is or how we've evolved to do it. And sitting on seats we know is weird because seats are actually quite a new design. And by and large, previously, if we wanted to kind of lower ourselves to something, we would squat before we actually sit, buttocks to the floor type of thing. So, but the squatting posture we've forgotten about a great deal. So I'm thinking, okay, let's try that a little bit and see whether that actually helps. And like I say, switching to and fro really does, in my view, really help.
Yeah, it's supposed to be very good for you, kind of opening up the hips in a squatting position. I've heard it can be very, very good for you, for your back, for your hips, for your posture in general.
Yeah. Good for your
stuff.
Good for your movements as well, Martyn. If you struggle with that side, that's also a good thing.
Absolutely. So come on, let's get to the nitty gritty then. I want to hear one word that best describes how you work.
One word. I think in a relaxed way, I would say.
Relaxed.
Yeah, relaxed. I mean, I think suppression of stress is quite important for me. Don't get me wrong, I work quite well in stress, but there's a huge cost after the delivery where mentally you're not there because you've had this stressful type of situation. So I think it's important to just keep perspective. I think this year has helped us do that. I've got to be honest. Prior to this year, I had to get that report in, I had to get this email out, whatever. But these days it's like, okay, actually the world's not going to collapse if it doesn't happen right now. It's already collapsed. So your email is not going to help or hinder. And it's just a little bit sense of more control is the way to do it. So that would be what I've learned in this year for sure. And the word I would use to describe how I'm doing it.
Relaxed. I like it. I think a lot of us can probably learn from that. I think there's certainly been, like you said, over the last 6 months, a significant amount of stress and anxiety with a lot of people. So learning to work in a little bit more of a relaxed way is so important for so many people. So I like that. I wasn't expecting that. So that's a good one. So tell me a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you are today.
So basically I was one of the very few people, I think I'm the only person that I can recall actually, and there's one more person in our industry actually, which who I forget who that is, but who basically opted to do recruiting. I mean, essentially out of university, it was like, oh, what am I going to do? And most people say, oh, I fell into it. But no, I looked at it and thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. And this is in like the Web 1 era, lots of interesting companies back in the day. eBay setting up, you had crazy type of e-commerce style businesses that were trying to launch 10 years before we were ready for it. And I wanted to get into those companies. I wanted to work for those types of businesses, but I couldn't program for shit. I couldn't do it. I remember trying to do a bit of sort of web page building. It took me like 3 days to write one page of HTML on Notepad. And whilst I managed to get a website up and running, it was like the most painful experience ever. And I just didn't enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy the forensic, needing to get every dash and dot correct. It was like, that's a detailed orientation I don't have. And I just thought, look, if I was going to be a programmer, I'd be very mediocre at best. I could do it because I work hard, but I'd be a mediocre developer and it would be boring. How else can I get into this world of tech? And this is when you see, okay, huge need for recruiting, huge need for people to, bring these developers on board. And I just thought, okay, why don't I join a technology recruitment business and maybe I could at least touch this industry via that means, and who knows, I might find my way in there in some fashion. So that's basically how I started in recruiting, nearly 20 years or so ago now.
Wow. And so that set you off on a journey really to where you got to today. So what does that journey look like for you?
First 10 years straight up agency play. So recruitment agents listening to this will know it. It's one of these things that if you're reasonably good at it, you end up staying for quite a bit, because it is good fun and you do earn good money. And, especially when you're living in a big city, it actually makes a difference to earn a bit of money. You have to say that, because your circumstances are massively, affected. So I was doing good, reasonably good performer in these types of companies. 2009 was the year when I really rethought my role in agency. I actually hit, I think, the top biller sort of mark in my business, and I hit a big number, and it was all this. And you know what, Martyn? It didn't feel anything to me.
Mm.
It was a weird one, because when you have a goal in mind, and you think, all right, I'm going to take home this number, and it was, that gives you the motivation to go ahead and do it. But when you achieved it, it was like, right, is that it then? You know what I mean? I'm never been a materialistic person that would go out and rush out and buy like a Rollie or whatever. It's like, whatever. It's just more numbers piling up into the bank account, right? Don't get me wrong, good to have, but it was like the achievement was more important than actually the material benefit. But once you've achieved it, it was like I really struggled to motivate myself. It was like almost like winning your first England cap and then having your career go downhill. It's like, right, it's not, oh, I've made it now. That it's not that. It's like, this is your goal. You've achieved your goal, and then you've lost your direction because the goal's been achieved. And I didn't know where else to go after that. It was about 6 months of me then being this kind of demotivated situation. And I just thought, you know what, I think I've got to quit. I remember actually, you end up disrespecting the job at some point. You end up sort of resenting candidates. You get really critical of clients. You kind of build that type of toxicity inside of you. And I remember one moment, it was very clear. I was like very hungover, I think, because I was still going out a lot at the time. Very hungover. I was on a call with a candidate, and I had trained myself. I'd just done this call so many times, this conversation. And I trained myself actually to be able to ask a question, which I knew would trigger a long response from the candidate. And I asked that because I was like, okay, I can now take a 5-minute nap while he answers. And then I'll wake myself up, and then I'll ask another question that would trigger another long response, and have another nap. And I did that, and had the call, screened the candidate, put the phone down. I was like momentarily really pleased with myself. I thought, wow, yeah, Hung, you're an ace recruiter. You can literally do this job with like 0.1% of attention. Aren't you fucking ace? But then that feeling evaporated within a second, and I just thought, Hung, what are you doing? You just disrespected this guy who's looking for a job. Number one, clearly disrespected him. Don't ever do that again. Number two, you disrespected your boss and your colleagues. They're all having a laugh, but you disrespected the business by literally not paying attention to a critical part of the job. And finally, you disrespected yourself, man. You've disrespected the job you're doing because you reckon it's a good thing, funny thing, you can do this at 1% attention. I quit on the same day.
Really? Wow.
Put the phone down, and I said, listen, what's happened here is I've come to the end of the road in terms of my motivation for this. And there's nothing coming, there's no other thing happening after, there's no plan. It was like, I just got to go. And I said to him, I was doing okay, not brilliant, but I was doing okay. And he was like, what? It's a surprising resignation, I guess, but I was clearly made up. So listen, I'm going to leave because my brain is not in this, and I've got to leave. It's I would purely be a destructive person in this business if I continued. So out of agency from there. I went. That was 2009. Yeah.
Wow. So that kind of moment of epiphany that you kind of reached your pinnacle of your agency career, and it was all kind of downhill from there, I suppose.
Yeah, it was like, where else is there? I mean, and like you say, the job is great in many respects, gives you highs and lows, has lots of subtleties and lots of, I think you need to be smart to do it. But it's not particularly complicated at that level. It's like, get a job, get a candidate, match them together, do a bit of good selling either way, and then bang it in, and hopefully you make a bit of profit. repeat. And yes, you can go down the management track, which would produce a different set of responsibilities and stuff like that. But I didn't want to necessarily do a sales manager job. And aside from that, it's like there's no other real path, right? You can just be a good earner, or you could be a manager. And for me, this is at the moment, 2009 is the significant time, because this is when LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, everyone's getting into these networks were now becoming ubiquitous. And I was thinking, this is exciting. Technology's coming around again. It felt very much like 2000s, actually, where there was all these new technologies coming in. This we now call Web 2.0. I was like wanting to get in there. And I thought, right, here's another big shift. I need to be part of this future. And that's where I wanted to really drive it towards, rather than rinse and repeat to make decent money. But it was like boring at this time, and I think a little bit stuck in the past. So anyway, my motivation when I left that business, and it would have left any business, nothing to do with those guys, and ended up just trying to figure out what I was going to do for the next 2 years or so. It literally was I see this very much like wandering in the wilderness, Martyn. Because I had a bit of an idea, but I had a bit of money stacked away, and it was like, okay, let's figure out how to make cash, but try and do it by learning new technology and figuring out where that's going to take recruiting. Still in recruiting, I just thought, okay, social tech is likely to change how recruiting works. Let's have a look how that sort of operates. If I can learn enough about it, maybe I can go and teach people about it. Maybe I could train people, whatever. I set up more or less like almost a social media training business, I would guess you'd call it. But it made zero money. It was like literally the worst business ever. It was because it taught me a huge amount. Actually, it taught me about, hey, it's not about having the great ideas or even the great sort of deliverables. It's about, do you have a viable product? Do you have a viable offering? And I didn't. I remember having a conversation. This is when I was getting at the end of my tether, by the way. So I'm burning cash for about 12 months now, right? And that's not easy, having gone from a decent salary to zero. It was, oh shit, what's happening here? Okay for the first 3 months, but then it's like, right now it's like pressure on. I'm just seeing outgoings. I'm not seeing any incoming. And I remember speaking to one good client of mine, and he said, Hung, listen, what you're saying is amazing. And I was saying, hey, listen, you could do all of these wonderful things with social tech, improve your branding. And now we call it employer branding, we call it talent attraction, that kind of stuff. The language wasn't really fully formed then. But he said, Hung, you just got to make it viable, man. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you got to de-risk your proposition. Right now you're saying, I'll do this, this, and this for you. He couldn't map it or connect it to an outcome on the bottom line to his business. And that taught me a massive lesson. I had to spool it back, and I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is change the business model of what I was doing. Don't charge in this way, make it super easy for people to buy, but then make it very easy for them to buy more. Once I figured that bit out, that's when, there was a big rebound, and I managed to make up the year plus of zero money very quickly. So yeah, it was like training for a little bit, then dropped into like tech startup type land, because the types of companies that were most amenable to do creative things in recruiting were themselves inherently creative businesses. When you're a startup, you've got a bit of money, you're there to disrupt banking or something, you're going to look at everything with a disruptive set of eyes. So when someone comes in and say, hey, listen, here's a new way to try and do recruiting, they're going to be more amenable to do it than if you have a legacy business that, oh, we've always done it this way. So I ended up working with a lot of these companies, and ended up being internal, half in, half the time. A bit of strategic, bit of operations, and then got fairly embedded in the startup world. It has to be said, a great part of the industry that I'm very happy to have managed to get into.
Cool. No, absolutely cool. It's really exciting journey. Some really interesting lessons there. I love the kind of epiphany moment that your customer shared with you. About how you need to communicate a value proposition when you're trying to sell to them and how it affects their bottom line. And
it's not even communicate. You need to have a value proposition that they can buy. I mean, I was doing great communication, but one of the things that is problematic for new businesses generally, and I think this is true for agencies as well, and anybody setting out on their own, which these days a lot of people are trying their arm at, is that we end up over pitching, and we end up meaning we're spending too much time pitching for customers, and then they're meeting us. We're burning time and energy, and they're ultimately not signing off on it. And there's a reason why they don't sign off on it. And it took me a long time. And this person, thank you, Steve, by the way, who told me, that corrected my path. And I just said, look, firstly, I never did another pitch again, Martyn, after having heard his chat. I realized pitching is not the way to secure new business, because you're going to get a lot of people coming in, and probably not with all in, I'd hate to call them kind of window shoppers, because they're not really, but it's hard to buy stuff that's not tangible. You're coming in providing consultancy services. Okay, fine. What does that mean exactly? I'm just going to, spin a couple of grand your way for no reason. Definitely agencies aren't going to do that. So you need to make it buyable. And the way I made it buyable was simply buy on time. I mean, I ended up thinking, I'm going to chunk out my time and you're going to prepay this time, and then we'll just audit it back. So the model I work with was pretty similar to how a lawyer works. Okay, you buy 20 hours of my time, you can use it as you want within reason. And then we just report back on what you've used it for. And I ended up doing stuff that was generally higher. Firstly, because it's a small pack at a time, it's not like a 3-month contract or whatever it is like that. You can charge it reasonably quite high per unit, per hour is quite high, but overall cost so for the project is very, very low because it's a small amount of work. But over time, this person is going to keep renewing and keep buying more because you're now a tested and tried and tested type of service. So it's almost like you've got to give like a try before you buy service, but obviously don't give it for free. But the way you avoid the free is you do a prepaid type model.
Nice. Yeah, really nice. It's I like that. I like that model and the comparisons between other industries. And I think that's one of the key things that I get from you quite a lot is how other industries are doing things so well, and those kind of transferable pieces that you can bring over to what we do within recruitment. That's the thing that I love about a lot of the content that you put out and that you curate as well is that transferable information and knowledge. So thanks for that. That's quite interesting.
Go ahead, Martyn. I think these are the questions, but just on that point, I love looking at other industries and even other disciplines. Forget industries, because you can learn so much from all of them. There's some underlying principles that can literally be like just slide across any industry. And I think if we're overly fixated only on the internal conversations we have in recruiting, we oftentimes just will miss an insight that could be pretty much accepted elsewhere in a different industry, but for us it'd be a revelation. And if you can grab all of that, that's going to give you an advantage.
No, I totally agree. It's kind of one of the rules that I live by as well. Is what can we learn from other people, and how can we implement that within what we do to make what we do better. So moving a little bit more on to the future, to the present, and obviously you're out there, you're running Recruiting Brainfood. You've got the weekly newsletter, you've got the Facebook group, you've got the chat bot, you've got your everyday kind of social activity as well. How do you manage your workload? Do you have a secret to how you manage your workload? Do you have an app to manage your to-do? What's your secret for productivity?
There is no secret because I'm not very good at this. Let's be honest, Martyn, I'm not. I mean, there's some people that are literally machines that can just box things off and go. I can't, and I don't, and I end up sort of definitely getting distracted as everyone does. And I could be better. There's no doubt about that. Probably the best way, and I've tried every task manager and all this kind of stuff, and I think a lot of the time these types of tools are sort of almost like you're trying to outsource the responsibility of just getting on with it. The thing that I've learned that has been effective though has been a time blocking extensions on browser. So these days most of your work is on a browser because it's web orientation. However, problematic because you'll have multi-tabs open, and once you do that, you'll have loads of things out of your control. So You want to get some sort of extension that will help you control that. And there's a bunch of them out there, but the time boxing app I think is really good. It's annoying, but because every time you finish a task, you've got to then set a time for the next task, but then you find actually you're doing it, and you're pounding through. So yeah, that's a productivity tip, but I could get better, man. I mean, I'm no expert at this. I'm not one of these Tim Ferriss style people, or individuals that can, oh yeah, I just wrote my novel today as well as do a marathon. No, this is not me.
It's just basically just getting on with what you need to get on with, and
as much as I can.
Up that time, and getting rid of any of the distractions. I like that. It's simple, but it's effective. I've dabbled with those time blockers and those tab blockers, and it's simple but effective because it gets rid of all of the distractions that you usually have, on your tabs. I'm just looking across kind of my screens, and 50 million tabs open, and you don't know which one to kind of go to next. So certainly worth it. So here's an interesting one. You've become a bit of a, I'm not going to use the word celeb because that's wrong. I'm not even going to use the word influencer because that's wrong. But you've done quite a lot, out there, socially, whether that's in-person events when we used to have them, whether that's, as part of your recruiting brain food. You've done a lot, thinking back to the marathon as well you did earlier on in the year. So I think a lot of people feel as though they've got to know Hungly quite well. But what's the one thing about Hungly that people don't know?
You know what? That's a really interesting question. Now I wish I had read every question that you put in that sheet, Martyn. What people don't know. This is really tricky for me to answer because the truth is I am pretty open in most cases. I don't think there's any secret I'm truly carrying that nobody knows. Apart from the fact she's buried. No, she's not. No. There's no secret. There's no secret. There's a lot of things people are not aware of simply because they haven't asked or haven't shared. But they're usually just normal facts. The way I see the distinction between privacy and publicity, if you like, is that is not a particularly clear boundary for me. In fact, I've learned to default to the public rather than to the private in most situations. And the reason for that is ultimately I don't like to stew on things internally. And I prefer to just have other people, potentially contribute to just the discussion on that. I think that's a useful thing for me to try. So I live my life fairly openly. If there's some sort of issue, I try to discuss it as publicly as I can. And through that, I think, generally people can get to know a little bit. I'm struggling to answer one thing that is definitely people don't know, man. I don't know my blood group. I don't know.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I think that's interesting because, like you said, you do live quite a lot publicly in terms of you try to get people involved in conversation, discussion, and so I suppose there isn't really much that is out there that you haven't, as you defaulted to public. So that's quite interesting that you can't think of one thing that might be unknown, but that's fine. That's absolutely cool. So couple of quick fire questions. I think we'll if you could summarize it in one sentence, why do you think recruitment is awesome?
Recruitment is awesome because you are genuinely helping people find work. And that's potentially a life-changing experience for that person. Could be a business-changing thing for the hiring company. So we're doing important work. That is not to be underestimated. That's one of the most important functions out there. It's not a compliance-driven thing. The government doesn't say you must be this type of thing. We're doing, I think, an amazing job to help people really change their circumstances. So I think that's got to be you can't forget that. That's the main and only thing that's important.
Yeah, I love it. couldn't agree more. It's one of the things that I always say to people as well. My kids, when they ask what I do for a job, I say I help people get jobs. It's the most simple explanation and the reason why it's so important. So I love that. So we've gone through a lot of change, a lot of change over the last 6-8 months. Obviously, that's been, the whole pandemic's been a bit of a catalyst to some of that change within the industry. What do you think is next in the world of recruitment, in your opinion?
I think the situation for us is going to be really radical, mine. This moment, I think, kind of will change recruitment downstream, because I think the main effect of it is actually going to be changing companies, and changing how we think about companies, changing even the reason for a company. As we are now distributed, we're getting squashed and flattened out. And the absence of the proximity, physical proximity, line of sight, etc., will ultimately mean we'll all end up questioning, why am I working only for this company? We'll end up, I think, being multi-employer at some point. We'll end up sort of having multi-revenue streams at some point. We'll end up therefore having lots more relationships with lots more people, but probably less strong relationships with smaller numbers of people. And what this means for recruiting is that it's going to be a very exciting spot for us, but it's going to mean fundamental change in terms of how it all works. Let me chain this down into something that's more easy to understand. Companies are going to hire less permanent staff. Permanent staff is one of the things that the companies basically who are carrying huge headcount, they've had to make loads of redundancies going in this period. They're not going to go through that pain again. They're looking for flexible working, on-demand staffing. They're looking for a totally different relationship of the types of people that they will interact with. People who've been let go, been made redundant, etc. They've now been stung a little bit by this, I thought this was my job for life, or I thought this is my job for the next 10 years, or whatever it might be. They're now very sensitive to the fact of, okay, if I'm next working for somebody, I need to make sure it's super secure, and I'm also not going to neglect this side project I'm doing. Suddenly the entire relationships will change. Basically, people will have more revenue streams from multiple employers. Employers will have many more types of people working for them that won't necessarily be full-time employees. What recruiters have got to do, agency and in-house, and HR, as a matter of fact, is really rethink what our value is, because the audience that we traditionally cared about, the demographic that we traditionally care about, is going to start shrinking. Particularly for permanent hiring. Obviously, you say, right, I'll segue into contractor, freelancing, recruiting, etc. Yes, of course, you should do that. But are you also thinking about how you interact with gig economy platforms? Are we involved when we're talking about offshoring decisions or inshoring decisions? What are we doing with part-time work, job share? What are we talking about working on purely on-demand basis, on a project basis, right? Do recruiters get involved there? We need to. So I think that's where we've got to go. Companies are going to get squashed and flattened. We're going to get squashed and flattened as well. We should embrace that. But what that means is that we should also then spread into these other areas that are currently not handled by typically a recruiting function or a recruiter.
Yeah, I like it. I think you're I think you're spot on. We're looking at a period of significant change in the world of work, and we need to be the function that supports that change and is the they say over the last 6-8 months, HR have been the real champions of this whole period. With furlough, with redundancies, with just changes to working from home, all those kind of things. I think you're right. I think as a function, recruitment, talent acquisition, call it what you need, is going to see a lot of changes, and we need to be the people that lead that for sure.
Yeah. Exactly that. We've got to be in charge of it. We've got to take ownership of it. Who else is going to do it but us? But it also means we've got to be brave. We can't stick to the old, and can't wait for the return to the old. That ain't happening.
No, most dangerous words I think right now are, because that's the way we've always done it. It's yeah, there's no room for that anymore, unfortunately. So, are you currently reading anything? What any book recommendations for anybody that's listening in?
Oh my goodness, I'd love to read more books, but the truth is I don't. There's no excuse, by the way. I really do need to dive into more deeper literature. But I found that doing a lot of the brain food stuff is that I'm always reading lots of different things. And what I've discovered is that I need a break from the reading aspect, the idea of reading text. So instead, what I've been doing is jumping onto YouTube, which, a lot of people might think, yeah, what are you doing on YouTube? But there's like a ton of great information there. And a lot of it is actually really good documentary type stuff. So I'm a big fan of military history, for instance. So I'm getting addicted to this channel called Kings and Generals, which is basically a documentary series on historical battles, significant historical battles, but it's played out through computer animation, right? Or computer game animation. And it's just fantastic because you can see the disposition of the troops, you can see how things are happening, and you can just remark on, wow, this happened, therefore, this implication was the case. And that's a world changer. So I would say there's so much different types of content out there. Reading, of course, needs to be restored to its rightful position. I need to step back into that for sure. But there's all kinds of avenues to get great content. And yeah, that's something I'm also trying to explore, different sort of different media to get this info.
No, absolutely. I think we can make ourselves ill with just the amount of content that comes our way. But there you go. There's one thing that people may not have known about you: military history buff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Same as. Cool. And one last question, random question, but I want to throw it out there. What's your favorite sandwich?
Favorite sandwich? That's quite easy, because I would say there's two, and they're both kind of similar, right? So I think firstly, I'm a big seafood fan. So I love a fish finger sandwich. You cut 4 fish fingers, some iceberg lettuce, some pickles, some mayonnaise. You put it on a crispy bap, bit of cheese in there. Boom, that's delicious. That's just one of the king's meals, I would say. So if I was going to make a sandwich, I would make that. If I'm in a Pret or something of this type, and I'm buying a sandwich, I would probably buy something like a prawn mayonnaise. Again, seafoody, right? But simple, but kind of clean. It's not got loads of oils in it, and it tastes good. And yeah, that'll do the job. So there's a pattern there. Seafood sandwich. That's me.
Good stuff. Love a fish finger sandwich myself. Well, there we go. Hopefully, we've learned a little bit more about you, and we've certainly heard some really interesting tidbits of information as well there, Hung. It's been really interesting to learn a bit more about you as well, and where you've come from and where you've got to where you are today, and how you've been a part of that journey as well as led that journey in some aspects as well. It's been really interesting.
It's been my pleasure having a chat with you, Martyn. This has been a great interview. So yeah, great to be part of this series.
No, thank you so much. And stay tuned for other people coming up. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Hung.
You're very welcome, man.